Morning, church. Let's say the prayer for illumination found in your church bulletin. Shall we say together? God of mercy, you promise never to break your covenant with us. Amid all the changing words of our generation, speak your eternal word that does not change. Then may we respond to your gracious promises with faithful and obedient lives through our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Today's reading is taken from Paul's letter to the Corinthians, chapter 12, verses 12 to 26. 1 Corinthians 12, verses 12 to 26. You can easily enough see how this kind of thing works by looking no further than your own body. Your body has many parts, limbs, organs, cells, but no matter how many parts you can name, you are still one body. It's exactly the same with Christ. By means of his one Spirit, we all said goodbye to our partial and piecemeal love. We each used to independently call our own shots, but then we entered into a large and integrated life in which he has the final say in everything. This is what we proclaim in word and action when we were baptized. Each of us is now a part of his resurrection body, refreshed and sustained at one fountain, his Spirit, where we all come to drink. The old labels we once used to identify ourselves, labels like Jew or Greek, slave or free, are no longer useful. We need something larger, more comprehensive. Verses 14. I want you to think about how all this makes you more significant, not less. A body isn't just a single part blown up into something huge. It's all the different but similar parts arranged and functioning together. If foot said, I'm not elegant like hand, embellished with rings, I guess, I don't belong to this body, would that make it so? If ears said, I'm not beautiful like eye, limpid and expressive, I don't deserve a place on the head, would you want to remove it from the body? If the body was all eye, how could it hear? If all ear, how could it smell? As it is, we see that God has carefully placed each part of the body right where he wanted. But I also want you to think about how this keeps your significance from getting blown up into self-importance. For no matter how significant you are, it is only because of what you are a part of. An enormous eye or a gigantic head wouldn't be a body but a monster. What we have is one body with many parts, each its proper size and in its proper place. No part is important on its own. Can you imagine eye telling hand, get lost, I don't need you, or head telling foot, you are fired, your job has been phased out. As a matter of fact, in practice, it works the other way. The lower the part, the more basic and therefore necessary. You can live without an eye, for instance, but not without a stomach. When it's a part of your own body, you are concerned with it. It makes no difference whether the part is visible or clothed, higher or lower. You give it dignity and honor, just as it is without comparisons. If anything, you have more concern for the lower parts than the higher. If you had to choose, wouldn't you prefer good digestion to full-bodied hair? The way God designed our bodies is a model for our understanding our lives together as a church. Every part dependent on every other part. The parts we mention and the parts we don't. The parts we see and the parts we don't. If one part hurts, every other part is involved in the hurt and in the healing. If one part flourishes, every other part enters into exuberance. This is the word of the Lord.
It was an arranged marriage. They only saw each other for the first time on the wedding day. And the bride was actually greatly disappointed when she saw the bridegroom for that first time. And the bridegroom could feel it. So that night, the first night in the bedroom, he told her that she need not accept him. He will take his clothes and sleep in another room, but not before making sure that she was comfortable. And this man carried on doing this for the next few months, until one day the wife gave in. She decided to give the marriage a chance, and thankfully the marriage turned out very well. He, the husband, won over the heart of the wife by the sheer force of his character and courtesy. What is the point here in this true story? What is your expectation? What is my expectation in a relationship? In a relationship of marriage, amongst friends, in church? What are our expectations? For 75 years, a group of researchers in the United States kept track of the lives of 724 men, their marriage, their career, their health, their emotions. And after 75 years and still continuing, 60 of them are still alive. They are in their 90s. These men were from rich and poor families. To discover what is the secret, what is the thing that secret to happiness that gives a satisfaction to a person. And the answer was just one simple thing, which was beyond the expectation of the researchers. It wasn't great careers, great wealth, good upbringing. It wasn't good education. It was just good relationships that gave these people health and happiness. And these incredible findings by the Harvard Study of Adult Development discovered over and over again. First, it is really not good to be alone. You must be in a community, in a social circle. But that is not enough. You must have good relationships, warm, loving relationships. It means getting along with that irritating spouse, with our siblings whom we wish they were never born. And also discovered this, that being in a toxic relationship, always in a state of tension and bitterness, is actually worse than getting a divorce. Now, this surprising finding is that our relationships and how happy we are has a powerful influence on our health. Taking care of your body is important, but tending to your relationships, I believe, is even more important. And these findings actually affirm what Scripture tells us, the importance of being together in love. In Hebrews 10, 24, 25, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together. And also in John 13, 34, a new commandment I give unto you, to love one another as I have loved you. So again, what are your expectations for this church in our journey ahead? We just concluded our LCC planning retreat, and our pastors, Pastor Theo Ling, Pastor Danny, are leading us on a journey to continue, for us to be disciples, to continue to be disciples, and also to create disciple makers. Let us do that together. And I believe all of us, we want to see our children, our children's children, and the generations to come, our beloved brothers and sisters here, 30 years from now, we want to see our next generation still coming to worship here, coming to know the faith, and becoming disciple makers themselves. This is my family picture taken 10 years ago during my mom's 70th birthday anniversary. Some of the suits were to Sewa. But it is a pleasant occasion to remember what relationships family through the years. 10 years ago, we still look as young. I'm thinking about my mom, still looks as young. Track vision statement. What is our journey ahead? Track stipulated this vision statement last year for the next 4 years. Come, follow, become like Jesus. Again, the emphasis on being disciples. But interestingly, one of the strategies, it actually appears on the small print, is this: to facilitate growth through relationships. Again, the emphasis on relationships. So friends, when I come to church, what am I looking for? Do I look for entertainment? That is planet shakers. Do I look for relief for my trouble? Do I come to catch up with my friends like this is a social club? On the other hand, do I see the church as a place where I see and meet fellow sinners, fellow persons who are equally broken and pitiful as I am, people who are also struggling with me? We carry each other, as someone described Jesus as the wounded healer. Do I see the church as a place or group of people who will welcome me as I am, without checking whether I'm fit, whether I'm socially acceptable, good enough, holy enough to join in or be accepted? A person once shared about his struggle to come to church when he was going through a difficult divorce, until he discovered that the church is not a club of people with happy, problem-free families, but it's actually the opposite. One member shared about when she first came to Malacca Wesley many years ago. She said this was the only church where the pastor welcomed her after she shared about her personal struggles. The funny thing about our faith, friends, is our religion is not a purely intellectual faith. It can only be lived in a community. What I mean is this: if I stop coming to church or stop communicating with other fellow Christians, it is I who suffer. So what is important is how I see the church. At one time, many years ago, when I came to church, I came like a consumer. I came to see the quality of the sound system, how good was the singing that morning. I actually came to be entertained. Can I catch something of what the preacher is trying to say that morning before my mind will wander away? I actually hardly came to see God, to meet God. I didn't expect or intend to meet God in church. For some, I believe many of us, we let our disappointments in church overtake us, destroying our faith in Jesus Christ. When a person feels betrayed and hurt by another church member, hurt by hurtful remarks, some mention the many hypocrites in church, or simply, I get nothing from coming to church. I fail to see the church as a family where we are all just temporarily here, a family which is far from perfect. Which brings to the first principle today. The church is the place where we all have to face our storms in life together, without having to pretend that everything is fine. I have learned that the church should be the place where I and anyone can feel comfortable, or not be afraid to come to ask for help and companionship, knowing that the people in church are equally going through, who can feel the pain and struggle which I do. For me and my family, many years ago, when we went through a crisis, I was greatly humbled when 2 or 3 of our members, whom we hardly spoke to, actually came privately to see us, to journey with us through this unpleasant experience. That's Pink Panther, Alcoholic Anonymous. How AA started. When a businessman, he was struggling to give up drinking in the US. So he stopped drinking for 6 months, until one day he had to go to another city to settle a business deal. The deal didn't work out, and he was very upset that night. So he was so tempted to go back to having a few drinks, until the thought crossed his mind to catch up with another friend of his who was also struggling to give up drinking. And he and his friend, who was a doctor, started a support group, and they called themselves Alcoholic Anonymous. Now the key point in AA is this: to find another person struggling with you with the same problems. And interestingly, AA has 12 steps, their philosophy. The first, and they're all based on Christian principles. I just share with you the first 3. First, admitting that I, Koon, I'm powerless to overcome my drinking problem. Similarly, in our faith, we acknowledge that we are sinners. The second is only God can help me with my drinking problem. And similarly, for Christians, we recognize the redemptive power of Christ. And third, surrender ourselves to God to solve our problem. AA actually tells their members who are not believers to surrender themselves to a higher authority. And this made me reflect deeply. When I'm facing a hopeless situation, a problem, like being an alcoholic or drug addict, I must first acknowledge the problem. Second, ask God for help. And third, surrender myself. But after going through a painful journey myself, I've also learned what we should be looking for in church. So when we step into this church this morning to start singing and praying, God is the audience. We are not the audience. And I realized that I must change from within. One writer, Walter Wing, says, to worship is to remember who owns the house. So what matters most, my dear friends, is what takes place within our hearts. And I realized simply this: how should I correctly see the church as a place that I have the right relationships? I believe Psalms 51:17 captures this well. What is God interested in? Is in our heart, a heart of submission, repentance, and brokenness. Which brings to our second principle: the church is our family with all its imperfections. You notice this interesting illustration, the lady with the horns in the middle. Like someone told me, she reminds of certain people in church with horns. With this background, we learn to set our hearts and minds on living in church. We practice 3 principles: authenticity, mutuality, and sympathy. At a D6 conference held 2 months ago, the speaker, Dr. Tim Kimmel, mentioned this. He's a pastor. He mentioned this about dangers in church, the poison. He called them poison. So there are 3 poisons he wanted to highlight. It happens in every church. First is the poison of comparison. Comparison can be 2 things. One is envy. The other one is embarrassment. Envy. Why is Sean's wife, why does she look younger every year? Envy. I'm envious. Of course, I'm not saying that my wife looks older every year. Huh? Why is so-and-so's husband very obedient? Whatever she says, he will follow. Whereas embarrassment, I got retrenched last week. I lost my job. I start comparing. I'm so embarrassed. The second poison is poison of condemning others. Don't we all? We like to condemn people. Instead of looking at the good in others, we look at the weakness in others. And I'm always reminded, some of our ushers will always tell me, some of our members call themselves Christians, don't know how to park the car. Always park at the shoulder, tonjol keluar. The other car cannot go through. Double park, call themselves Christians. Some complain, I've heard, because I visit a lot of churches, some complain, the pastor always shake hands with those who got big cars only. I'm not referring to our pastors, please. And then the third poison is poison of prosperity. The ambition for wealth and worldly success. Our youth counselors mentioned this recently. They had a discussion with a youth on persecution of Christians in Malaysia. And one of the teenagers made this very good comment. You don't see that in Malaysia because we ourselves are no different from the rest. The way we conduct ourselves, also pursuing wealth, people don't see us any different from the other faiths. And I recall a friend who asked me whether I knew of any church in Malaysia whose members were scandal-free, or they had all had perfect families. Our bishop, Dr. Ong Waitek, mentioned this at our recent laity conference 3 months back. We should not let our failures define us, but let our failures bring us together. I am reminded of an interfaith conference held in UK many years ago, where the leaders of the major religions came together. And they all made the same point, that all religions teach people to be good and kind. Until the last session, C.S. Lewis, our Christian writer, brought this up. He said, but only in the Christian faith, where we emphasize grace, God's love with no strings attached. And this is what our faith is all about. The grace of God, no strings attached. Over and over again. I must learn to love my family, my spouse, my irritating relatives, my fellow believers, my stubborn members of my care group, people who are unlovable, people who don't know how to park their cars well. I must learn to love them. And I believe once this is clear, the journey is easier for each one of us. Is there grace and humility? Would I welcome someone who smells when he comes and walks into this church on a Sunday morning? I remember this actually happened 3 years ago. There was one elderly man who came in, and I welcomed him. He sat at the back. He came twice. But I felt so bad because he smelled bad. He smelled bad. And I didn't know what to tell him, what to say to him. So how do we welcome people into our faith? And a point which is a point of concern in our track leadership and amongst pastors is, do our children want to come back to our church when they grow up? It is a problem facing many churches today. In church, first we practice authenticity. Not superficial, just chit-chat. But it involves heart-to-heart sharing. We share our hearts. We share our failures. We ask for help when we need to. We acknowledge that we are vulnerable. Several years ago, we organized an evangelistic dinner where we invited Gurmit Singh, also known as Phua Chu Kang, the famous Singapore comedian. And I had a chance to talk to him for just a few minutes. And I asked him, what is it like to be a celebrity? And he made this interesting reply in Gurmit Singh. He actually very quite skinny guy. He appears on TV. He said this, Xiao Chabo. I said, what kind of response is that? How is life to be a celebrity? He said, Xiao Chabo. No, he said this. I actually appreciate that I got to know my wife before I became famous. Because he said, as a famous person, he found it very difficult to make relationships. A lot of people wanted to get to know him just to get something. Just to get something. He made that very interesting comment. In 1 John 1:7-8, but if we are living in the light as God is in the light, then we have fellowship with each other. So friends, we live an open life, not in darkness, not in pretense, but in courage and humility. Meaning we face our fears of rejection, exposure, and being hurt again and again. And we learn to face discouragement. We have two choices. We either let discouragement take away our focus from God and our family. We let discouragement overwhelm us. We get caught in our own self-pity. Or, with the discouragement, we let it bring us closer to God. Let God come back into our lives. Give God a chance to work in our lives. Teach us to value who we have. Talking about authenticity, our children are the best barometer, measure. Two children were watching their parents. They come to church very polite, very warm to others, speaking well with others, to others. And when they reach home, they could hear their parents, the same set of parents, complaining about members, complaining about a pastor. And they had a difficult time to understand what authentic relationships mean. In church, we also practice mutuality. This word means to give and take, the art of receiving and giving. We learn to share responsibilities. We help each other. We do things together. We have many things in common. For me, 35 years ago, when I started in this church, I was so focused on my career. I was absolutely focused in my career until I actually ignored God. God had no place in my life until something bad really happened to me. And only then that I started coming back to serve in church. And that actually changed my perspective to life. To value what is eternity, to value relationships, to value my wife, my children, my parents more. It needed a jolt to change my life. And which brings to our key verse today about life in church, that God designed our bodies to understand our lives together as a church. We all depend on each other, and we have many roles to play. The parts we mention and those parts we don't. The parts we see and the parts we don't. And God put us all here for a reason. And I have some interesting testimonies of some of you members who have told me privately of how a certain word, a certain phrase, a special phone call, and now a special WhatsApp message from another member actually gave that person a new hope for that dark evening he or she was going through. You don't know how God will use you to light up another person's life. Each one of you is so important. The New Testament actually says more than 50 times about to do to one another. The next one is we experience sympathy in church. It means this. It's not just giving advice, quick cosmetic help. It's not just to feel sorry for that person. But sympathy is actually to share the pain with that person, to journey with love and concern. It'd be wonderful for just to say to that dear friend, I understand what you are going through. What you feel is neither strange nor crazy. Sympathy meets two fundamental needs. First, the need to be understood, and second, to have your feelings validated. When each of us understands and affirms the other person's feelings and pain, we build relationships. We help to walk with a person in time of grief, struggles and pain. We give the person encouragement, or at least a shoulder to cry on. And we facilitate the process of receiving and healing. And ultimately, we give the person hope. But again, my friends, sympathy can become difficult when we want to fix things quickly without taking time. Everything takes time. In the Harvard study, the professor mentioned this. Relationships are complex and messy. We must acknowledge this. There's no shortcut. Sometimes the danger is we ourselves are caught in our own self-pity. For example, I have enough problems of my own. Let my dear friend take care of herself. I don't have enough energy to hear to her all her sad stories every evening. She's got all her other friends. Let her go and find another shoulder to cry on. This verse, I think, is appropriate to say that share each other's troubles and problems, and in this way obey Christ. We share the burden together, we share the sorrows together, which means we journey together. The third is the family, is the foundation of the church. The funny thing about family, you cannot choose your family members. We just get in by being born into that family. We are thrown in together. Different characters, different bad habits, but the same family, the same surname, the same face, the same way of walking. But the church goes one step further. We voluntarily choose to come together because we are followers of Christ. Again, we are thrown in together. All of us here in Trangkera, Wesley, Melaka, different characters, different bad habits, different way of parking your cars, but followers of the same faith. And in both situations, we journey together. Like a family, as in the church, failure does not cancel membership. In a family, we carry each other's pain, joys, disappointments, and likewise in church too. In the passage where Paul writes, the church is like the human body. We need each other, we depend on each other, we coexist, we tolerate each other, we bear with one another. But again, we remain and journey together. This is a picture of the vision statement just now. And the board of laity. What is the board of laity? It's a committee made up of the lay leaders of the church of Trek. The board of laity is re-emphasizing family ministry. We have always been operating ministries on separately. You have the youth ministry, seniors ministry, women's ministry, worship. But the board of laity realizes, with the advice of our beloved clergy and president, is we need to work together. So family ministry is an umbrella ministry. And how we need to work together to bring the family together in the church to be disciples. Teresa Yip, she's the president of Methodist Women Track. She shared about her home church, Trinity PJ. When the boys' brigade asked the aunties, the Methodist women, to help them because they had their boys' brigade day and they wanted to start a cooking competition. So MW, in an innovative way, said that we'll not only teach you how to organize a cooking competition, we'll teach you how to cook and cook for the whole event. And that was an example of how ministries can come together to work together. The Board of Laity has been organizing and introducing programs such as Alpha, D6, and our recent Laity conference. We noticed that a constant reminder that the core driving principle is that the family must be the primary discipler. It is the family. We must move from the traditional belief, practice, that it is the duty of our local pastors and the church who should disciple us. But we must then change our mindset to initiate a paradigm shift in the thinking of our members. The primary duty is we ourselves to be the primary discipler. The family first. And what I mean by the family is two things. First is the biological family. I'm the husband. I'm the father of my children, my wife. The biological family. The other one is the spiritual family. You have brought someone to Christ. You are the spiritual father. You are the spiritual leader in your care group. So discipling actually starts with us. The church and our pastors will assist and equip and inspire us in doing this. So this is the thrust of the Board of Laity, to remind us again that families, it is our duty first to disciple ourselves and our families. And we let the church and our pastors to assist and inspire us. We view families as the foundation of a successful society. Today, I believe more than ever before, families are under threat from social media, parents who are too busy. The change of moral values, everything becomes relative. You get unhealthy families, you get unhealthy churches. YB Hannah Yeoh, Deputy Minister of Family and Women's Affairs, shared this at a sermon she delivered at our Laity conference 3 months ago. This is her department. 60% of divorces in Malaysia, the cause of it is finance, money. The number one culprit of child abuse is the child's own mother in Malaysia. And she said, why? This shows that couples are not prepared for marriage. They are not prepared for the financial pressure, emotional pressure. And ultimately, it's the poor lady, the mother, who suffers. And she becomes the first culprit for child abuse. So YB Hannah actually encouraged churches, all of us, to give, she said, apart from the standard tuition to society, she said, all of us can play an important role to give counseling. She said counseling to others, especially marriages under threat. She also said this, if we ourselves don't educate our children, our siblings, our adults, Satan will educate them. But many have asked me this, how do you expect us to bring our children, disciple our children? My children are working adults. Many of them are going to university. They are all grown up. We like to share an experience. Dr. Yi, our district lay leader from Seremban, shared this. There are a pair of faithful grandparents in his church who brought up their 2 grandsons. They were discipling their 2 little grandsons until these 2 young disciples, because of their testimony, the boys' parents decided to come back to church. So grandparents or older parents, it is not too late. We pray with them. We live our lives. We share our values with them. For many of us, including I myself, repent for not doing enough. I should have spent more time praying or reading the Word with my children. But we must continue. Even though whatever faces in life, we can start that journey of discipling or disciple making again. We spend time with our adult children, our grandchildren. We go back to the basics. A Chinese Hokkien pastor in Malacca shared with me this. His 2 children both went to Wesley School. He said this, now they are working, one in Singapore, one in KL. He started a WhatsApp message for his family. gave a one-sentence verse and a one-sentence comment. And then it grew to his church leaders, to his church members. Until now, certain days when he doesn't make a posting, they will send a message, Pastor, where's the message today? He said this was an interesting way of reaching out, to reach out again to members, family, even though many of us have gone more senior in age. Friends, the church today offers hope to our families. First, by educating family members about the role we play in our homes and in our community. Second, we equip families with successful relational skills and resources to make better family choices, such as alpha parenting, alpha marriage, which is being conducted. Third, we encourage family members to keep their promises and fulfill their commitments to one another. In addition, we offer hope, a grace-based approach to relationships. Parents and churches, we work together. Parents can effectively parent their children with the support of good training and discipling at church. And likewise, churches can effectively train and disciple our members with the support of good parenting at home. So we work together, friends. So ultimately, the family is the primary discipler. And we work as a team with the church and with our pastors. Lastly, the church starts with the family. I end today by sharing this true inspiring experience from our church itself. 35 years ago, a young man came to know Christ in our church through the Boys Brigade. His father died when he was young. And this young man, after, I believe, Form 5, he was interested to go to Seminary Theology Malaysia. And we asked our LCC to support him. One of the members of the LCC expressed reservations because this young man, he did not have excellent results, academic results in school. But thank goodness, the other members of the LCC saw his calling. He went off to STM, and he was also supported by his fellow members of the Youth Fellowship. That was 33 years ago. About 7 years ago, this young man was ordained as the new president of TRAC Malaysia. And I was there at the ceremony at Kuantan Wesley. This young man, now no more young, he's almost, this was 6.5 years ago. He was, I think, one of the youngest president of TRAC. He gave a very short thank you speech. He said this, he said, when I was in school, I was about to attend a public exam. I was told it's Form 5 exam. And I was told 2 weeks before the exam that I cannot take the exam because my fees were not paid. Those days you don't pay fees, you don't take your exam. 2 days before the exam, his teacher called him and said that I had paid the fees for you. And he said this, all I want to say is, I want to say